Welcome everyone to a new video for the series Project in Patristics. I'm very happy to welcome Dan Batovici. He has had quite a career. He had his PhD in Leuven and he also worked there for 9 years. And now he has won not one, but two grants. One is the first one is the Austrian Science Fund Generative Authority. And the other one is an ERC Consolidator grant on secondary pseudoepigraphy. So Dan, what can you tell us about these projects?
Hello, Lavinia. Thank you very much for inviting me for this conversation. There are two team projects, and they both are focusing on the reception of idealized early Christianities. And they do so by looking at the development of the literature around secondary figures of early Christianity. The sample is composed of barely historical figures of the 1st century and the 2nd century that are said to have met, followed, conversed with a main apostolic figure. That's the bigger thing. And the project in the first project, the one that is a START award from the Austrian Science Fund, focuses on the literature where they are literary characters. In parallel with the apocryphal literature, which is focused on the main biblical figures, and that which is a literature that has developed for 12 centuries in many ways. We also get in parallel full-on literary corpus around secondary figures of early Christianity. So this project that started in September 2024 focuses on the literature where secondary figures of early Christianity are main literary characters. We have already out a description of the project in the good section of the journal Early Christianity on new projects. We describe there the method and what we do and how we do it, and the corpus, the literary corpus involved. I'll take this opportunity to also introduce my team. From left to right, Maria Tomas is an art historian and a Syriacist, and she is working on the Syriac side of the project. And her work at the moment is on the image in the 13th century of Mary Magdalene in a series of monastic contexts around Jerusalem. And also she's working these days on a text devoted to Hierotheos, the other Athenian character than Dionysius. Christoph in the middle is working on the Greek side of the project. He's a specialist in Greek and Latin manuscripts and also in musical manuscripts of early modern times. He is working right now in putting together the checklist of Greek manuscript for this project. And Andy Hilkens, he's Syriacist and Armenologist. That's his specialization, and he's also teaching Coptic at the University of Vienna. He is working on the Armenian side of the project. But the literature that we are looking at includes these figures. It would be something like Thecla of Iconium, Mary Magdalene, then Hermionios of Ephesus, the daughter of Philip, but then also early Christian authors that are known from other corpora, Clement of Rome, Dionysius the Areopagite, Ignatius of Antioch, and so on. And then also figures that are known even less from the apocryphal literature. And I think I can stop sharing for now. So this project focuses on the development of the literature that's focused on these such secondary figures, and it does so by looking at the manuscripts, cultures where they were copied and then translated. So we cover Greek, Coptic, Syriac, and Armenian. And the fourth colleague will join us for Coptic in the autumn. Now, the new project that will start, the ERC Consolidator grant that will start in September of this year, focuses on a different literary corpus with the same basis. It is the literature that is attributed to these figures. So again, going in parallel with the apocryphal literature and with the corpus of the first project, we have another literary body where these figures function as a pen name. People wrote for 12 centuries under the name, kept writing letters under the name of Ignatius, wrote full-on theological treatises corpora under the name of Dionysius the Areopagite, and they wrote ecclesiastical canons under the name of Clement of Rome. But they also wrote all sorts of other literature that you might not expect necessarily there. For instance, they wrote Apocrypha. In order to feel, so they also functioned as operators, as authorial figures for filling in blank spaces in the Apocrypha world. So the characters, the figures that follow in episcopal lists, Peter as the first, second, and third, and fourth bishops of Rome, you get literature under that name later on. So we get literature not only attributed to Clement of Rome, but also to Linus of Rome. We get two Latin martyrdoms, one of Peter, one of Paul. And in Coptic, under the name of Evodius, who is ranks higher in the Coptic tradition among the bishops of Rome, we get two homilies, one on the Passion and Resurrection, and the other one on the Coptic homily on the Dormition of Mary.
Yeah.
So get the whole spectrum covered. Basically, all these figures, both as authors and as characters, worked as placeholders for all sorts of new concerns and new literature in time. And again, in this second project, we will be looking at the development of the literature in Greek, Latin, Coptic, Syriac, and Armenian manuscript cultures.
Excellent. And it's incredible how the two projects relate very well with each other, and you can work on them at the same time. So what initiatives are you carrying on with the project? I know you have some research seminars online, right?
Yes, we started for the characters project from the first year an online seminar. The idea being to invite people who already work on these figures, not necessarily from our perspective. We needed to get in the same room all the projects that are going on in Europe and beyond, where people are looking from their perspective to these figures. So we invite them to present their projects and how they approach these figures, and ask them to kindly address a couple of our questions. So for the first year, it was the question of how the figures that they are working on from their own perspective, some are doing critical edition, some are doing literary studies, some are doing religious history. But we also asked them to address the question of how the secondary character is characterized in those words that they are dealing with in relation to the apostle to which they are linked. So that's the common ground for all of it. It will be a volume later this year or at the beginning of next year. And this year's seminar, which is curated by Maria Thomas, who we've seen earlier, is on these figures in cultic contexts. So for each of the figures, main figures of the first project, we look at real life liturgical or otherwise cultic context that we know of from late antiquity or medieval ages. And there are interesting things coming up, and they are not usually put in the same conversation. For instance, people that work on the Apostolic Fathers, there is a collection that goes by that name with its own history of publication in the last 150 years or more. They rarely look, they do focus on the oldest text that they can find around Ignatius or Clement and ignore the whole rest of it. And it's just the focus of the field. And looking at culting contexts, it's basically, and in a comparative manner, is entirely new. And we are doing that, and we only just started. There was a paper 2 weeks ago, and we have one paper per month, and it will go the whole way. And we with paper on Clement of Rome, Ignatius, Thecla, and so on.
That's excellent, and I think it's a great initiative, and many members of the association will be interested in joining these online seminars. So what do you envision as the main outputs of these projects, these very exciting projects you're carrying on?
There will be a series of, well, for both projects, what we are trying to look at in detail is very poorly studied. Like they didn't attract attention. So for the first letter attributed to Clement, to the Corinthians, to Clement of Rome, you can compile a bibliography of 50 pages. Any new volume on that will have one of those appended at the end. For the two letters on virginity attributed to Clement that were composed in the following centuries, the bibliography doesn't go beyond the page. It's just a thing. And that implies, among other things, the fact that we don't know the manuscripts that in which they were copied. So we are first trying to do the groundwork. We're going to find all the manuscripts of this literature. We will produce critical editions for smaller texts. We choose them as smaller and unknown texts. And for those, we create small critical editions to article size.
Yep.
And so, for instance, we have now in work, it will be a future thematic issue of ZAC, the journal, with new texts around these figures. And it will be, I can say, the three that are already in review process. There is an article on the first witness, continuous witness of Ignatius of Antioch in Syriac. So far in Syriac, we only have fragments quoted here and there that sort of reflect continuous text, continuous translation into Syriac of the letters of Ignatius. Now we have in a palimpsest identified by Gregory Kessel, who's also in Vienna in his own project, in a middle layer of a triple palimpsest, the continuous text of two folios of Ignatius. That would be one of those. And a first text, martyrological text in Armenian about Clement of Rome, and a first presentation of a Syriac text about Mary Magdalene that was incorporated in liturgical commemorations in the 13th century in a very specific context, and so on. It is a bit like that. We will produce new things that are not known there, and we will produce comparison. We know things, some of these figures have received some attention, quite some attention in the last 50 years even. Thecla is well studied, and she is,
Very well.
yes, quite a lot.
Very
Then
Magdalene too.
yes, and Dionysius the Areopagite has
Course.
attracted huge projects around all that literature. Ignatius is not neglected at all, but comparison in the reception, the manuscript reception of all these figures on this level
Yep.
across several manuscripts, we have not yet. So that is our main aim in the end. But until then, it's all groundwork.
I want to thank you really for showing all the work you're doing and how you're doing it, which I think it's a real enrichment for everyone who's going to watch this video. So thank you, Dan.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to discuss the two projects.